Welcome to the Cinematography Database Studio. Do I like that camera position? A little bit this way, a little bit that way. I think that's pretty good. Hey guys, welcome to Cinematography Database Show. My name is Matt Workman, and today we're going to be breaking down the cinematography of Hail Caesar that was shot by Roger Deakins. It's a Coen Brothers movie. It came out the 5th of February, and I think this comes out a couple days after that, so it's actually out, so you guys should go check it out. Go see the movie Hail Caesar. Here's some footage from it.
This is going to cost the studio a lot of money.
And that's where you come in. I need some cash.
You must have very strong forearms. Is it hard squeezing it like that?
It's part of the job, miss.
I'd like to know what the hell is going on here. 20 million readers want the truth, Eddie.
Truth, yes.
Eddie?
So won't you tell me no truth? I wanna only your lies. Don't you tell me no truth? I want only your lies.
This is a drama, Mannix, a real drama.
Mr. Mannix, I know it sounds screwy, but someone's calling from the future.
Good Lord.
So give me only your lies. Give me only your lies. Give me only your lies. Give me only your lies.
Wondering what's going on?
Do the wrong sweet.
Okay, so here we are. Hail Caesar. Pretty cool. A little bit daunting to break down a Roger Deakins movie, or really any movie. But I think I went through and I found some behind the scenes photos. I checked out the behind the scenes video, which I'm going to link you to. And I think I've read a lot about Roger Deakins' work. I follow a lot that he does, so I think that there's some stuff that I picked up on that I think that would be cool to share with you guys. You guys let me know if I'm full of shit though, if this is absolutely ridiculous. So hand-drawn title, of course. I'll do it every time. Here we go. We're gonna go to the slate. So Hail Caesar, what gaiety. It's always a good time on a movie when you can have some fun stuff and some custom printed what are we calling these? I don't know, custom printed title, and you get your name written in a nice font. That's good stuff. I think this is one of the goals. This is a mini goal in life, is to get this. Also cool for them to call out Sarah Jones. And this was shot, I guess, in 2014. So if you guys don't know about Sarah Jones, I'll have to find a link for it or something like that. But definitely go look up Sarah Jones, and that's it. Maybe I'll have to do a whole video on that at some point, but it's cool that they put that on the slate. So here's our first scene, and I think we're gonna do 3 scenes and then just some kind of random stuff that I think was cool. So we're gonna talk about some Roger Deakins lighting, and this is stuff that I learned from not Road to Perdition. What's the movie? This is why I should do research before these, but the movie with Claire Danes. Anyway, I read about some of the lighting techniques that Roger uses, and he'll use whatever lighting best serves the movie. He's not like me, who only has one type of lighting style, and that's all I can really do. He can do it all, but he has techniques, at least, like how he uses lights and how he uses diffusion, that to me it's interesting, and I've tried to replicate it myself on a couple commercials, and he uses that kind of lighting in this scene. So to start, there's some obvious things here. Before we get to the lighting on George Clooney, we have lighting coming from the windows, and that's pretty obvious. But it's soft lighting, and it's not, there's no real hard source anywhere, but you can see the lighting coming through here. It's on the wall. And then there's a little bit of lighting coming from this window as well, but none of that lighting really makes it to George Clooney. This is what I would just call it ambient lighting at this point. And then we have also this practical here that's kind of throwing out light in this style, and then the same thing over here. And this window light and this practical light here, that kind of mushes together. They're pretty close in light level, which basically means that these are really bright practicals, or the light on the wall has been slowed down a little bit. But they're the same light level. The lighting on the lamp should actually be really, really warm compared to daylight, because daylight is I'll just write this out. Daylight should be 5600, whereas that lamp should be 32K100. So that should be really warm, but I think they've neutralized it just to make it, not so distracting. It would call attention to itself, I think. But maybe not. So here is the ambient light of the room, and we'll move on to the next shot. So the question is here, what is this stuff? What is this? You know, it's clearly this big diffusion, and it's actually how Roger Deakins lit this pretty much the entire scene, at least going towards George Clooney's direction. And it's how he lights a lot of his projects for these type of scenes. And I've started to use this kind of technique too, and it's cool. And I want to show you a little bit how that works. So let's get oriented here. I have a diagram at the end that kind of brings this all together, but let's start being detectives here, DP detectives, and tearing this up. So look at this wall here. Look at this photograph and this lamp. When we cut to here, that picture is over here now. So this light source is over in this part of the room. It's behind this character here. And that's what we're seeing here. And what this is he lights the room more or less with practicals and with ambient daylight coming from the windows. But this here, I'm going to rate it, is bleached. Bear with me now. Bleached muslin. And if you haven't heard of muslin before, it's basically canvas. It's like a sheet of canvas. That's about it. It's kind of like a thick bed sheet, and then it works really nicely as diffusion. And I remember that, you know, depending on where you are in your career, maybe even the world, most people work with like light grid, Hampshire, 250, 251, that sort of like standard Lee Roscoe diffusion stuff. When I first heard of bleached muslin, I thought people were joking. I thought people were like, were screwing with me. I'm like, you use like this canvas stuff to light through, and I used it on a commercial just kind of like on a whim, just to mess with it with my key grip, and it came out great, and it's really nice, and it does a good job of blending small sources all together into one big one, and that's exactly what's going on here. Here's another shot. We can see the first AC measuring to get focus, so you can assume that the camera is more or less where the first AC is standing. So we have this two shot, I would assume. Perhaps he's measuring to him. Maybe it's a single on him. And we can see the lighting from this big, I have to change colors, like a really quite big light source. And I'll show you how big it is in a little bit. That's all bleached muslin. And what I want to call attention to here is the height of the bleached muslin. Now, so if this was a beauty job, you would put it up here so that the light's very even. But what they've done, or what Roger Deakins has done in this scene, is he's kept it kind of like below the window level. So if we go back to here, you can see that the window's up here, but the light source is below it. So you kind of have this uplighting happening, which is a little bit of that, like, I keep hitting the mic. It's a little bit of that, like, like foreboding kind of lighting. It's a little bit scary, but it's so soft and rappy, but it's subtly coming from below, kind of like below head level. And or maybe because he was sitting before, that's just the height that it was. But for me, I think it's kind of giving this like really subtle, you know, tone shift to the scene to have the key source be kind of low instead of being like above head level. So there's some subtle stuff happening there. And this is kind of the widest shot where you see everything happening. You'll see that this light source wraps all the way around. So it goes even behind. Not only is it a side source, but it goes behind. So it becomes like a front light for George Clooney here. And you can kind of see here what I'm talking about. The fact that like the light's not coming from this direction, it's really only coming from below. It gets this kind of interesting tone to it. And we'll see that on this side of his face is pretty dark. And the same here. It was the same in the other shot. But because it wraps around, because this source is so wrappy, you have the eye light and you have this like nice, what is getting hit by light is pretty nice looking. And that's kind of a trick of lighting darker, is that if, as long as you have an eye light and you have kind of like a clean, like something that's like, you know, pretty smooth looking, it's kind of this fine line between, you know, scary, dark, and bright. So I think that's like a good way of mixing those two together. So make sure you have an eye light and make sure that the source that is hitting the talent is pretty large. So what else can I call here? This is a film camera. Okay, so they shot film, presumably 35. You know, just so you guys know, I don't do a ton of research for the movies. I do interview feature DPs, but it takes a long time to get in contact with them, and then everything I say has to go through the presses. The presses has to go through like the PR companies and Hollywood and the studios. Honestly, like the articles I've written, some of them, all those images have been cleared by studios. It's kind of a thing. So this one, I essentially just go find B-roll and behind the scenes stuff on my own, and I do my own interpretation of it. This might not be 100% correct. But then again, the stuff you read in American Cinematographer and those trade journals are not necessarily 100% correct either. But I'll leave it at that. So they're shooting film here. I don't know what stock. I would assume like 500 tungsten Kodak Vision 3, the new stock. We have a Zeiss Master Prime here, and this focal length I would guess to be about a 25. That's kind of Roger Deakins' thing. Kind of likes to shoot wider lenses, and we'll talk about wider lenses. I don't know if I'm going to do it in this one, but I learned about wider lenses, and I learned about why wider lenses are more cinematic, but we'll go there in a bit. So this is an Arri 535, so it's a sync camera. It's gigantic. It's really a beast of a camera. This is a Cinetape, so it's using sonar to shoot a signal to George Clooney and then back. And that time, the time that it takes, it's able to judge the distance. And they use this, the first AC uses this to have another readout of where to put the focus in the scene. And this is Roger Deakins' Power Pod, which I heard his Power Pod got broken on Unbroken, on the movie Unbroken, which I did a breakdown on. But perhaps he got a new one, or they fixed it. So we're moving on. So here is our lighting diagram, and I'm just going to shout this out. This was made in a program called Photoshop, and that's how I'm doing this screen record too. It's how I make these drawings and whatnot. And Photoshop's like a really powerful kind of standard, industry standard de facto for doing image editing, and I use it to make all of my graphics. And I was like, you know what? I want to be able to make lighting diagrams in this program too. I use Photoshop like multiple times a day. It's so powerful, it does everything. And I was like, I'm going to make my lighting diagrams here. So what I started to do was render out all of my 3D film equipment things in 2D from overhead, and I put them into a big image or symbol library. Each one of these little graphics is called a symbol. And I was like, you know what, this is really cool. I'm going to put this together. I'm going to sell this. I'm going to give this to people so that they can use it to make their diagrams in Photoshop too. So that's what this is. You can go to cinedesigner.com. I have a free trial right now where if you go sign up for it, this is before March 1st. March 1st it comes out. But if you go before March 1st, basically you can go download a couple free people, some cameras, some lights, and you can start to get your feet wet with making diagrams in Photoshop. And I'm going to do a lot of videos and courses and stuff on how to make diagrams here because they're really important. Pre-production for DPs is really important. And then for us right now to get back into this, I'm going to start illustrating some of the scenes that I don't have behind the scenes for with Cinedesigner in Photoshop for your benefit. So here's that same scene, and it's like a 25 foot by 25 foot room. So I drew a square. Here's the furniture. It's a desk, a chair. It doesn't really matter. I drew some white squares where the windows were. But what's important is that we have these 4x4 diffusions, which are representing, again, a bleached muslin kind of blanket, just like taped around the wall. And then there's HMI sources inside of it. And then again, that is this. That's what that looks like. And here's my lighting diagram for it. They were using a jib. Yeah, that's pretty cool. I'm really happy with Cinedesigner so far. So again, guys, check it out, cinedesigner.com. So let's move on to our next scene. So if you don't know anything about Hail Caesar, I don't know how to say the name of the movie because it has like a Hail comma with an exclamation point. But it's like a movie within a movie, and it's kind of like an ode and a throwback to kind of like the older, like golden age of Hollywood. And it's kind of shows like how the actors were treated and how the movie industry's kind of evolved. So it's really cool to me. It kind of reminds me of Rock of Ages, where that movie kind of shows you like how music evolved from rock to like pop and hip hop, at least culturally. So it's an interesting movie. It's like history and movies put together. So I really like that. And that's kind of what this movie's about. And the whole point of me saying that is because Roger Deakins kind of has a natural style of lighting, but in this movie, because it's he has to kind of recreate some of the tones of the older movies, it's funny to see like some genre-esque things out of Roger Deakins. Like, I'm not sure Roger shoots music videos anymore, but this is kind of like a Roger Deakins music video to me because he has to do these different styles. So anyway, this is clearly a film noir. Shout out. So we have our detective's office, and we have our, this kind of hat, trench coat, very film noir. And I think he's probably honestly even going in to see like a detective or something like that in this scene. And as far as storytelling goes, for telling story with lighting and with framing, this is just everything. It's so great. So we have this person's name, and it says securities, bonds, and escrow. So you read that as in this frame, and you're like, what does that mean? Like so there's securities, and so and there's a name. So it sets up this question. You're given this information as this question, and then inside of it, you see that there's this really bright light source, but it's it's through this transparent kind of like stippled glass. So you're like, oh, there's something in there. Like what's going on? So it draws you into it. I love this frame. That's why I love it. There's all this story happening in it. And we have this kind of light hitting him here from the top. Probably like a practical. Sorry if my voice sounds a little weird right now. I'm kind of fighting a cold, so hopefully it's not too distracting. And then inside is this big neon sign with an arrow that's like literally pointing at this guy. And it just kind of invites you in. It's like this question. You're like, oh, I want to see what's going on. So being able to build that kind of anticipation for scenes is cool. You build the anticipation, then you have the payoff of what's actually inside. Moving on. So we have, this is hilarious from the trailer anyway. We have Jonah Hill, and he's like a securities and bonds person. And we have, you'll see in a second, someone in here trying to get some information from him, clearly, or trying to get something from him. So we have, again, the neon sign in the back, which is really cool. And we have these Venetian blinds. Again, very film noir, Venetian blinds. There's a lot happening visually in this scene, so I'm really excited to break this down. So let's talk about the lighting here. What is this lighting on Jonah Hill, and why is it? So one, this is a night. It's a night scene. And what's happening is that what I see is that there's two distinct layers of lighting on Jonah Hill. And when you get into lighting locations globally, and then lighting people locally, which is a concept I'll come back to, you get layers of lighting, and that's what's happening here. So the first layer, one's brighter than the other, but I'm going to call the ambient lighting of the room is here. So let's draw this up. And if you see, this is kind of like a more saturated and a darker orange. And that light source is over here. We'll get to it. I'll just spoiler alert right now. It's a lampshade. And that is the lighting coming, let me get that color. That is the lighting coming from the lampshade, not the light below it, and nothing direct. It's the lampshade. So you picture light coming through like kind of like a dark lampshade. It's going to be this kind of muted color, and it's very soft as well. And this color is everywhere. Let me grab some more. It's in here. And it may be the casting of this primary shadow here, and it's a little bit over there. But then we have this lighting that's a little bit brighter, and that's the light that's coming. Oops, why isn't that drawing? Oh, I made it black. That's the lighting that's coming from under the lamp, and there's actually like an exposed bulb here, which you'll see in a second. So that lighting is, and it's a little bit whiter, less orange, because it's not coming through the shade anymore. And that's bouncing up here, and that's hitting his hand. That's doing this work, and then if you go back here, you can see that the lighting on his chin is a little bit lighter. So that's this. And then what I want to call out next is that this scene is lit with basically just this lamp and one backlight. It's kind of a background light. But then, like, how are we lighting up this? And besides that, how are we lighting up this back wall? How are we lighting this stuff on the desk? What's happening? And this is kind of like what we talked about on the K-pop video with the shiny floor. This wood is reflective. So there's not a lot of direct lighting on it. Like, this is the direct lighting. And these little note cards up here, these little labels, very dark. But because it's a reflective surface, it's reflecting the other light source in a very natural way. So by turning on this one lamp, you light up Jonah Hill, but you're also lighting up the more reflective objects in the scene. So you'll see that here, a little bit here and there, that sort of stuff, this stuff here, that's all from one light source, and it all feels natural, it feels motivated. So when you're doing this sort of darker scene, if you hide some reflective objects in the background, you get some free lighting. Reflective objects equal free lighting. I should make a course on that. So here's our reverse. Again, the same sort of idea, and there's two things I want to talk about here. So we have the lamp again over here doing lamp stuff. The lamp shade's doing the soft warm lighting, and there's a little bit more of an aggressive hit coming from, like, I think what this would be, and maybe this part here is some of the aggressive lighting, but the rest of it's pretty warm. Something I wanted to talk about here is that she's fairly light-skinned, and then this is presumably a white dress, I would assume, but because it's being hit with colored light, it picks up that color, and your eyes read it as, actually your brain probably reads it as white, but your eyes are recording it as orange. And what they used to do in black and white film days, again, this is just history lesson stuff, I wasn't around when we were shooting that stuff, but what they would do is, because like the white would clip so quickly, this turns into white really quickly on camera when you have to hold this and something that's darker, the white clips. So what they used to do is they used to do tea staining. They would literally take tea and they would stain everything that was white tea colored, so it would actually be off-white. So tonally it would be a darker value so that you could hold basically the white value and at the same time some darker values. So I guess film in that era perhaps didn't have the best dynamic range. Or you know what it was? Film has great dynamic range. It's when you project film, you might get like this like 18 stop dynamic range on shooting 35 millimeter film, but when you project it, it's like 7 stops. It's bad. It's not great. You capture this gorgeous image, and then when you project it on film, there's a lot of problems, honestly. If you've ever shot something on film and projected it, it's not great. It's not awesome, and the technology never really quite got better. The last thing I want to talk about here, I forget how many I've done so far. I think I said I want to do 2. So we have this lamp, and again, that lamp is naturally lighting this, which is presumably white paper, very dark. Some more shiny stuff happening back here, and then there's really subtle value change back here. There's no backlighting, and I think that's really cool. This scene is all about having one lamp and just letting it naturally fall off. As it gets further from the lamp, it gets darker, and it's beautiful. It's really a nice scene. Here's another cool shot of Jonah, and then I'm just gonna draw the lamp again. Now it's like a triangle lamp. Again, the warm light hitting him here, but then the aggressive bounced light hitting him down there. Bare bulb. And let's prove all of this. Here's the lamp. Here's the actual lamp. We see a bare bulb, and then we see that there actually isn't a shade, but that's kind of what I get from it, is that even if there isn't a shade right here, let me just pick a color like this. Even if there isn't a shade, it kind of feels like that. And maybe the walls are warm, and there's just warm wall light hitting him. And that's kind of, that's what I've learned from watching that's what I've learned from watching Roger Deakins' Light, is that it's not about this like direct attack of light. It's like, oh, there's a lamp, and that lamp is hitting you right in the face. Or it's like there's daylight, and that daylight's hitting you right in the face. It's more about what can I communicate with the bounce lighting in the room. And to me, that's really powerful, because say you're in this scene, it's not that there's a lamp hitting you, it's that there's this warm room all around you, and that warm room is giving you this warm lighting. So using the lighting, using these layers of light, the lighting itself kind of subconsciously communicates something about the room, because you're in a room and there's light bouncing around, and because you can't see what's behind the camera, when you have light coming from that direction, you're subconsciously telling people more about that room with the lighting. So that's really strong, and I like that, and I see that in this scene. I think that's really cool. So let's move on to this next scene. This shot right here is the most quintessential Roger Deakins plus Coen Brothers lighting and framing that I've ever seen. And this talks about that same kind of like implied lighting that I was just talking about. So let's talk about why this is very Roger Deakins and very Coen Brothers style. So we have a wide lens, and when you shoot with a wide lens and you do a close-up like this, we have him in the frame, and his head's about 50% of the frame height, but then we also see the entire background. And when you're shooting with Zeiss Master Primes, like Roger Deakins does on pretty much every single one of his films, you can open up and you can still have a wide shot, be close to someone, and have all this information about the background. There's so much information back here that's subtle. So we have the sconces. So these are practical light sources. If you haven't read my tutorial series on practical light sources, go ahead to cinematographydb.com, go to the tutorials, how to light a wall. We talk about this kind of stuff. It's really important as we move through this and we want to get into more advanced uses of this. You have to at least know the basics. So we have these little sconce lights that have these little lamp shades, and these lamp shades are actually really similar to the lamp shade in what would have been the other scene. And we have this depth where you can see into the kitchen. It's a very rounded retro kitchen, versus like a modern kitchen would have very, it would be stainless steel and it would be more square. This is very rounded and white. Lots of depth happening there. Very cool. We're getting a lot of information about the background. It's very lit by practicals, very, very realistic. And then what you get here, I'm going to get real big with this brush, is you feel like there's this big warm source over here. And it's like it's kind of what this would be like. I'm going to make my brush smaller again. It's like what this source would be if it was its own light source. So you get that here. So you have this warmer, soft half light happening on his face, and it tells you about what's behind him. It tells you that there's another one of those walls with these sconces behind it, and it's this really warm light. So what what we have here is that the tungsten is more or less white, though it's a little bit on the warm side as far as the color correct. The color correct shifted the whites a little bit warm. And then we have this overly even more warm light that's kind of coming from the lampshade in this scene. And I just love this. I love this type of lighting. It's not like contrasting blue and orange. It's like white and orange. And I just really like how this looks. And this close-up, Roger Deakins talks about it a lot, where it's like, you know, when we're doing close-ups on people and you're in a movie, I guess this is the time I'm going to talk about it. You can get close to people in a movie. You can be right up on there. Versus like E&G or sports or something like that, you have to be back and you have to film in or you have to zoom in. If there's a lot of cameras, if you had a camera really close to them, no one else could film that person. So that's why it's cinematic to be wide, is because you can get right up on there. Single camera coverage. You don't have to be back with 3 cameras. You can just be right as close as you would be in real life. So he's kind of keeping the camera and the person at a real life distance if you were having a conversation. And that's what you get. And if I had to call it a focal length, I would say that this is anywhere from 21 to 28. And I think that's the focal range that Roger Deakins really likes to use when he's shooting close-ups like this. Now, actually, focal length doesn't mean a lot. It doesn't mean what it used to. When we all shot with 35mm film, 21mm, 28mm, that all informed the same focal length. But now with all the different film backs, that's actually kind of irrelevant focal length. So I'm going to be... not getting rid of it, but just changing the way we talk about field of view, really, and focal length. Because 21mm on a Alexa 65 is a much different field of view than on a 535 here. So it's a much different type of thing. Let's move on to our next slide here. Same scene, but just the same wonderful, wonderful Roger Deakins, Coen Brothers framing, very wide, a lot of information in the background, yet still soft. So we're very painterly, of added detail here. And again, the practical source, very motivated. Seeing the source in the frame just always feels good. It always feels cool. Another practical down there. Put the practicals in the frame, guys. They tell you something about the location. And then because the lighting is warm, that's telling you even more about the location. So he's cementing this person into the location and he's telling stories with it. The last thing I want to do before I go on to some of the last frames, which really don't talk about lighting as much, is just kind of some fun stuff, is when people say painterly, what does painterly mean? Okay? There's a lot of things, and you'll see here that I'm painting. This is painting. This is digital painting. And I've studied painting. I did painting in high school and college. When DPs are talking about painterly, one of the things that painters do is, because you're painting, is you can selectively choose the resolution and the sharpness. So for instance, if I want to draw a shape like this, that's a square. It's kind of a blurry square, but I could also do a much sharper square where I do it with a much finer brush and there's more detail. I'm not going to finish that. So that's one of the things that is painterly when we're talking about painterly. This is not the best example, but hopefully it shows that this is somewhat like of a sharper square and this is a blurrier square. And that's what we're doing with depth of field. And that's what DPs use when they're saying painterly. So by selectively focusing on our character here, he is sharp. So he is being painted with sharp detail. Versus in the background, if I was to paint this background, it would be very, very soft detail, like a bigger brush, more diffused. You see how she's essentially being painted or rendered softer, blurrier. That's selective focus. That's a visual tool to get people to focus on one part of the frame and not the other. There's a lot of other things that mean painterly that DPs can use, and that would be a fun course, wouldn't it be? Like how to apply painterly techniques to cinematography. Roger Deakins does it. You probably do it too. You just don't necessarily realize it if you don't come from painting. But that's one of the things I wanted to pull out here. The reason we like depth of field is because the same reason that painters liked it. And painters used depth of field before cameras were even invented. They would selectively add detail and sharpness to parts of the frame to call attention to it. And that's what we're doing here. Sharp detail, soft detail. So yeah, painterly. Moving on. So again, this is the movie within the movie. This is the movie that they're making called Hail Caesar, I think. Oh no! Actually, I don't. That's not what that is. That's a different movie. This is just one of the movies that they're making. And what's funny is that in this one, Roger Deakins. This is why I say Roger Deakins music videos, that he had to do lighting that was, not the natural style. This is very 1940s, 1930s, 1920s Hollywood lighting. So very hard light. So let's do some fun stuff here. Again, I apologize for my voice. I realize that I can feel it. It feels weird. Okay, so here we are. Here's a big 10K. and it's shooting light at her. I'm gonna cut that part out. Sorry, guys. So here's our big 10K studio Fresnel. That's how they used to light stuff like this. Because film was so slow, and you had to stop down because the lenses weren't very good. You're talking something like 100 ASA, because it was film, and you'd probably have to be at like a 5.6, if not an 8. So that's a lot of light. So it ended up being like a 10K directly at you, and that's what's gonna do this lighting. I'll call this out here. That's what this big shadow is. And then we can see in the back here, if you look at her clavicle and her shoulder, there's another backlight coming from here. And then if you look at this down here, see how this is kind of confusing on her shoulder here / chest. See how there's a lot of different shadows? That's what happens when you have multiple lights with multiple shadows, or multiple lights hitting one object. You get multiple shadows. And it's honestly confusing to read the shape. That's why we don't, as DPs, necessarily like having multiple lights. We like one strong light source to begin with, and that makes the shadows simple and clean, and you read the form faster, and it feels more realistic. So that's the reason DPs like one light source. But again, Roger Deakins is recreating the old school Hollywood style of lighting, where you had to use hard light. Soft light was it wasn't a thing. Soft light meant invisible. You didn't do soft light back in the day. So this is Roger Deakins kind of doing that. The rest of the stuff in this frame, this is a movie within a movie, so the lighting here is kind of like, I don't know what to say about it, but there's just some fun stuff happening in this scene, and I love stuff like this. This is like part of the reason I started Cinematography Database, is because I'm actually modeling a lot of this old school movie equipment, because I'm just in love with old school Hollywood lighting, and I want to preserve it, and I want to have it in 3D and kind of show people how it used to be done other than these photos, but they're doing a great job here. So I'm just going to call it some stuff real quick. Really big old school Mole Richardson. I mean, not necessarily Mole Richardson, but Mole Richardson used to make big booms like this for audio. This is a platform for him to stand on. Pretty cool. This is a cool doctor's bag that he would bring to set that has its own director's chair. Let's see. This dolly is really interesting. It's like a huge platform that you have like another kind of mechanical old school, like pre-Fisher, pre-Chapman pneumatic arm on it. And that's what I'm assuming these are doing. These wheels here kind of do that. And we have, look at the size of this camera. That's like a small camera back in the day. That was like a Mitchell camera. So just really cool recreation of an old Hollywood set. I love this. I would love to do that, except I have no idea how things were made back then. This frame, again, we have our key grip here, pulling the dolly. Really interesting. And this is like an early Fisher dolly. Maybe that's what they looked like back in the day. You'll have to tell me if you guys know about that stuff. I don't know about it. Look at the size of this gearhead. There's no gearhead that's playing on movie sets that's this big these days, but this is a Mitchell gearhead, likely with gold wheels. That's awesome, or brass. And then a gigantic effing Mitchell camera. Big ass camera, man. Look at that dolly seat. This light's on for no reason. Here's our director, and here's our, I guess, first AC, and that would be the operator / DP. And this, I just want to call out here that when I was getting into the DP profession, I read a lot of books on DPing, and a lot of the books are kind of older at this point. And something that I learned was that the DP, this is something that used to be true, is that you could say that the DP was the best dressed person on set, and that everyone in the camera department wore a tie. So this guy, I hope you're wearing a tie under there, bro. Where's that camera department tie? But this guy, is he the best dressed guy on the set? I think the director probably is, but he's number 2, and that's probably the way to do it. You don't want to outdress the director. Let the director get his shine on. But best dressed guy on set, the DP. That's old school Hollywood. I love that. This is still, by and large, what sound stages look like in Hollywood or in LA. There's no grid. Everything comes off of the greens. This one has kind of like a green walkway built around the set, which is a little bit weird. Don't really do it like that anymore. I think these are like work lights up here, and then they're just kind of backlighting everything with these big Mole Richardson lights. And there's something cool happening over here, little pickup scene, and this is just like a really, really cool recreation of an old school movie set. I love this stuff. I'm gonna be making these later when I have all the Mole Richardson stuff in 3D, and then. So maybe more or less this is how they used to light back in the day, but here are the guns, the 10Ks, the big eye Fresnels, like big 20-inch lens in the front. Those were the key lights. So this is the ambient light where all these spotlights, and then we had these big Fresnels that would come in and key people. So let's see, we're wrapping this up here. This is something that I thought was really interesting from the trailer. Again, we have the Venetian blinds in the back. And this is someone editing film. So if you didn't know about how you used to edit film, this is a recreation of that, and it's pretty funny. And, all the old school filmmakers, Quentin Tarantino and the likes, everyone's doing their film throwbacks right now. This movie's film, which I get it. And they're showing their film love. This is the frame that every director who loves film wants to put together. It's like someone editing film with a film reel in the back. Like, yeah, full film nerd going on here. And we have our film editor here smoking, which is kind of a joke because film is made out of acetate, which is insanely flammable. So the fact that you'd be smoking while editing film just shows kind of like the disregard for safety and maybe how the movie industry was back in the day. And then, not for nothing, from what I've read, is that a lot of the film editors, like for Hitchcock and a lot of the early founding editors for Hollywood, a lot of the editors were female, and there's not a lot of people that talk about that history here. So I think that's cool that they kind of called that out. And then this is the view that she would have been looking into to edit film. So you're literally like, have film going through a projector. You're looking down at it, being projected with a light bulb. You cut it, and then you watch it back. I mean, I can't think of anything more painful than that besides perhaps stop motion animation, which I do. I don't do the animation, but I shoot a good amount of stop mo these days. So let's move on to our last frame. I didn't give you any warning. This is the last frame. Tears, sad. This is my most favorite thing that I found in the entire trailer. All the trailers, the whole thing. I'm going to spend a second here calling this out because I want to, and because it's my show, I can do what I want. This actor's name, we're going to spell it out. And I hope this gets to him. I hope he sees this. Jeff Lewis. And Jeff Lewis, to me, this guy's name is Voight. And Voight is from, I'm going to calm down. I'm going to calm the nerd rage. Voight is from a show called The Guild. And The Guild is about the World of Warcraft guild, which is a group of nerds who get together and play World of Warcraft together. And I like this because I used to do it a lot, so I liked that there was a show about it. And Voight was the guild leader. He was the guild master. And anytime I see Jeff Lewis, I just cannot stop. I cannot get the images out of my mind from the guild. So if you like World of Warcraft and you wanted to watch a show on it, I'm sure you've heard of the guild at this point, but go check out the guild and go see Voight. And then, of course, go in theaters. It's out now as of recording this video. Go see Hail Caesar. And go see Voight in it. Voight's in Hail Caesar. Oh, shit. Okay, so that was our look at the cinematography of Hail Caesar. I still don't know how you would say the name of this. With the grammar is not my strong suit. If you've read my articles and read the responses to them, grammar and I are just... we're not good friends. We're not at all. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I was a little bit intimidated to break down Roger Deakins' work, but I think I found some cool stuff in there. There's some concepts of stuff that resonates with me that I use in my work that I recognized on this film, and the stuff that I've read about Roger Deakins' work. And I think this film is like shaping up to be a really good example of that. And I love movies about movies. Hollywood loves movies about movies. I'm really looking forward to seeing this movie. I think you guys should go see it too. If you liked that lighting diagram, I'm not going to pull it up. Go check out cinedesigner.com. And if it's before March 1st, it comes out and it'll be available for you. But if it's before March 1st, go to cinedesigner.com and you can download some free starter stuff to get you started. Thank you again for watching. If you like the video, give us a like. Leave a comment. Let me know what you want to see broken down, what you like, what you don't like. I'm here for it. I got tough skin. I'm on the internet a lot these days. I got tougher skin more and more every day. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
This is going to cost the studio a lot of money.
And that's where you come in. I need some cash.
You must have very strong forearms. Is it hard squeezing it like that?
It's part of the job, miss.
I'd like to know what the hell is going on here. 20 million readers want the truth, Eddie.
Truth, yes.
Eddie?
So won't you tell me no truth? I wanna only your lies. Don't you tell me no truth? I want only your lies.
This is a drama, Mannix, a real drama.
Mr. Mannix, I know it sounds screwy, but someone's calling from the future.
Good Lord. So give me only your lies. Give me only your lies. Give me only your lies. Give me only your lies.
Wondering what's going on?
Do the rum and the swing.